Okay, let's get a little practical for a minute. I want to talk about the moment that non conceptuality becomes conceptual. So you hear teachers say, you're already awake. You're already this. So, right at that point where you're like sitting here, you're going about your day, and you get lost in a thought or a thought reflection, it only takes one thought to take you off in the thought loop land. And there's been a conditioning of directing attention. Let's say there's a power here that's the power of potential, and that's awakeness. And then that awakeness has a certain power called attention. And that attention has been conditioned over a lifetime to go towards thought, to go into, to be enveloped by, whatever way you want to say it, into thought. That's conceptuality. And it becomes so instinctual that it's just assumed to be a fact of life. And that's what conditioned means. It's conditioned to be that way. So, in very practical terms, when you start working with this, you think, I'm not already awake. I fully immersed. I believe I'm this. I believe I'm that. I have all these things. Yet, non conceptuality is right there, waiting, operating as you, as what you actually are the entire time. And then attention is being funneled from the potentiality that you actually are into thought making. It's imputing in the thought. It is being hypnotized, and the attention is being taken out of potentiality into thought reflection. And it only takes one thought believed for that to start. And that process is then thoughts talking to thoughts. And there's a tension in between, and that's identification, in my view, the way I look at it. Um, and there's also a tension right when thought starts to, prior to, there's the gap, and then there's a tension, and there's thought, then there's tension, then thought. And that tension is identification. It's not the thoughts that are the problem, but it's the belief in them. It's the identification with them. And the way out of that is recognizing that recognition. So, on a very visceral level, in the moment when you're captured by thought, you go into one thought and then it becomes a reflection of thoughts. And then you're in a hall of mirrors of thoughts or thought loop or a hallucination. Self is like a hallucination that's appearing in this thing that you are, this potential. So when you start working with this stuff, you get really lost in a thought reflection or a hall of mirrors of thought. And then all of a sudden you pop out and you say, I came back to presence. Well, saying I came back to presence is the thought talking to itself. Do you see that? It's very subtle, but it's like, oh, I came back to presence. So now you're out of presence, talking from the thought loop, saying I came back to presence. Presence itself is already here. Potential is already the case. That's awakeness. That's non-conceptuality. And then there's sometimes the hallucination or the grab of the attention is very subtle, and sometimes it's quite strong. It's the subtle ones that really sneak in there and get you, especially after you've been practicing for a while. And you may have been practicing hard for a long time and then still get caught and then say something like, oh, I'm back to square one. It's like I haven't even done anything. So that's a belief of being on a path. But that path is in thought. and popping out of it and seeing from non-conceptuality is, what you are and always have been, that potential. So you have to catch that moment better and better. Now, these thoughts can seem very solid, right? That thought reflection, Hall of Mirrors, can feel very solidified. But once you've had the resolve to see and practice, then once you start catching thoughts, they may take you into several thought reflections and then you pop out of it. But once you can take away that instant judgment of, I'm back at square one, or I always get caught in this, and instead just recognize that you were in that loop right here and there, you've introduced a new condition called clear seeing. This is sort of what I mean by clear seeing. At the beginning, attention is the word, because you're just starting to put attention on something or take attention back. You're drawing attention out of thought. It's like you're almost like you're sucking the power right out of thought back into the potentiality of what you are, where it belongs. And that attention is drawn automatically into thought by years of conditioning, but it can be unbound too with recognition or clear seeing of those processes. So the clear seeing is not within the algorithm. It is not you. You are a thought. Clear seeing is potential. It is what you are. It is not bound by the algorithm. So at first, when you get caught in one thought, then you get caught in reflections and you come out of it, it feels super solid. It feels like a sense of separation, a sense of self. But when you get better at this and, you start recognizing judgment thoughts and time thoughts and all that kind of stuff, expectations, impatient thoughts for what they are, and you just recognize them without doing anything about them, you have freed up some of that conceptuality, attention back into potentiality. So when you start doing that, when you catch, the closer and closer you can get to the gap where the conceptuality starts from, there's the gap, and then the conceptual energetics start flowing attention into the thought. At first, you won't be able to catch this, but with diligence and practice, you can start to catch it. And if you can really get really good at seeing the first thought as it formulates, you can stop the Hall of Mirrors dead in its tracks with that first thought. And it'll start right back up again, and you'll keep practicing. But over time, you get real good at this. But what can happen too is that solidity that you thought was there, that binding tension in between thoughts that makes it feel like identity. Over time, when you start catching the thoughts at the beginning spot of formulation, they can unformulate, and then the thought reflection could collapse. And what's interesting there is that with the clear seeing of doing that, when the first thought comes that drags you into conceptuality, drags that attention, even if it does go into a thought reflection, you are right there with it, seeing the thought reflection forming, and the thoughts can then also appear very empty. They don't appear solidified now. They don't feel like you. They show up and then they disappear in the moment. They never even fully arise. And then when you can catch that, you can start seeing the emptiness of them, and they can start falling like dominoes within the presence of what you are. So what I'm getting at is, over time of seeing, you stay as the potential, and even when the thought reflection forms, you watch it form from that first thought, and then even if more thoughts come, the attention is not dragged or bound into the consciousness of thoughts or identity. And when that recognition happens over and over again, you get a little bit of that attention back here. And this is like a very practical way I'm talking about it. I'm trying to do. But if you get judgmental or you get impatient or you have expectations, then that is the fuel that puts that attention back into conceptuality. Oh, I just can't do this. When will this ever end? How long is it going to take? That's a thought. You're back into conceptuality. And it's a pain in the ass at first. But the more you are resolved to see with clear seeing and not doing, the seeing right there is a recognition. It is a recognizing. It is not fighting with. Even saying something like disidentifying with thought implies effort. And I do say that. But it's more like recognition. The recognition pulls the conceptuality back to the non-conceptuality, or the attention back to potential. It pulls that attention automatically because the power is staying in the potential and not going into the thought loop or the mechanism or the identity. And then you can really start to see how that identification with thought works. It is an attention that has been conditioned to go into it and believe it. So then you can, stay right here, and then you can start to see a thought arise in the experience without being carried off into thought loop land. It arises right here in what you are and disappears. And then even if other thoughts come to reflect, they can disappear. And more often than not, if you catch the one thought, the entire thing falls apart anyway. But it may, as a momentum, it may have the first thought and then more thoughts and more thought, but you can stay right here. And the attention is not going into that reflection with diligent practice and looking. But if you want to believe thought, if you're so used to it, you have to break that conditioning of wanting to believe or being so conditioned to believe with attention. You have to let that attention become unbound and stay into unconceptual land versus conceptual land. And you also may start to notice that thoughts arise in what you are actually as that potential. And a thought is a potential, is potential itself becoming thought. It's not separate. It's just one thing. And that identification with it was always just a belief. And when you really start to see that more and more, that recognition stays here, that attention stays here, that power is right here. And it feels unbound, it feels freed up, it feels very visceral. And it feels like what you actually are, which is awakeness. And that conceptuality, it feels at first it had all your attention, but now it feels very minuscule. It feels just like a firefly flickering in the air, or a little firework going off. And it goes off in non-conceptuality. And you fall for it less and less. You judge yourself. You don't believe the judgment thought less and less. The time thoughts less and less. Expectations change. And you start to come to terms and realize that, that boundedness into identification is just a thought that keeps being thought, or an assumed thought. And really, it's that attention has been conditioned to be dragged into the conceptual. And this is right here is the crux of where a lot of people can get really confused. And they can say, yeah, but I'm da-da-da. It's like that little moment, that little switch where the attention funnels right into a thought and gets bound up is conceptuality. Non-conceptuality is when you're right here, when it's right here and it doesn't get bound up. Or you see the bounding start to happen and then it doesn't. And then the thought comes and goes. It comes and goes anyway. But the tension that stays in conceptuality that gets bound to the next thought is the belief in being a separate. It believes it's separate because it's not staying here. It's bound into the thought reflection of the hall of mirrors of thought. And it stays there. And that's like mind identification. So an awakening can be that sudden switch of perception to that, oh, I'm not that thing of that bundle of thoughts. I'm this thing that's alive and visceral and doesn't need a conclusion, and it doesn't need a conceptual word or phrase or thought to tell it what it is. It's a mystery. It's a mysterious happening. And I don't mean this in some new agey way. I mean in an immediate visceral sense. This unknown, this potential is, it doesn't need a frame. It doesn't need a guardrail on it. It doesn't need to be compartmentalized into something. That's what thought does. So that practice can be learning how to work with that right here in the moment and just get really good at being unbound. And when conceptual or thought tries to bound you, just letting it be there and letting it go and not being bound. And that's not done with effort by the human, because any effort made will automatically take you into thought. So this is what I mean by clear seeing. Clear seeing is not done by human eyes. It's done by unboundedness. It's done by potential. It's done by seeing outside of the algorithm, outside of the thought reflection of the hall of mirrors. It's not of this. Clear seeing is not of this world. It is what makes the world possible.